Hi,
everybody. We're going to go as long as we feel, Brian. This is a series of indefinite length. At some point, we're going to say edit point, and then we'll be like, I think that's good. And then we'll stop, and then we'll do the next one, and we'll just keep going where we left off. That's the plan, I think.
Okay.
Lucy, I guess if we have Trev here. Oh, Trev has a request. Obviously, we're going to cover this in this one, but he has some points about Kucherov and that you can bring up as part of your Gensel discussion. Curious how you think the PP1 will shake out in Washington. Okay, let me write that in the list. Yeah, I asked Brian right before you came if there's anyone in particular people want to hear about. So let me just throw Washington here as a team to cover today. Washington. I actually found game day tweets pretty helpful because I could just go to a team and then just get all the things they did right there really quickly. So that's how I've been prepping this show. Washington. Chris asks PP1 if Oshie not there. Okay.
If Oshie
so
not
with that,
there. I just saw there's a light on
Dubois
in the distance that I'm gonna go turn off.
Okay.
I'll be right back.
And then it's time. Yeah. So hopefully everyone's on board with the plan for this show. I think it'll be good. I'm drinking a beer. Hopefully, I don't think it'll affect anything. But I hadn't had one in a while. And I like beer. I went to a baseball game, not last weekend, but the weekend before. Blue Jays against the New York Yankees. It was like a bunch of the dads of the neighborhood. I feel like everyone thinks these are my only friends, but it's not the case. But this was an organized thing, and the Blue Jays really suck. Like that game was not a competitive baseball game. The final score I think was 8-1 or 9-1, and you can just tell that I think the Yankees could have gotten more runs. And also there was a whole stretch where they kept on hitting, the Blue Jays kept on hitting different Yankees players with the pitch. And they hit. So the main guy on the Yankees, I'm just going to ramble here until Brian comes back, unless someone asks me a question in the chat, I guess. But the main guy on the Yankees is named Judge. And he came up. He was second at bat, I think. And a friend of mine was like, and everyone was booing. They were booing Judge. And I was asking my friend, why are they booing this guy? Like, he's the best. And as he was saying it, Judge hit a home run. I was like, okay, I get it now. That was 2-0 right at the start of the game. And then Judge later on got hit with a pitch. And it was oh, shit. Because Toronto's best guy had gotten hit by a pitch also. And apparently he had an injury and he missed the next game. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. So that was the most exciting part of the game. Honestly, the best part of the game was I got this popcorn that was free refills. And I refilled it once. We were all just getting in on this popcorn. And then at one point I gave it away. And I felt like a real magnanimous, it felt good. The person was thanks so much. And I was don't worry about it. It's I gave it to this, I just turned around behind me. And I was does anyone want this? We don't want any more pop. It was full. We had gotten our third refill. It's I can't eat any more popcorn. I was does anyone want this? Then some lady with a kid was oh, we'll take it. And then she took it and she was feeding her kid with the popcorn. I felt like a real guy, It's the little things make you feel good.
Great use of the word magnanimous. It's just one of those words that you just sometimes you drop. When's the last time you came across that word?
I don't know.
Where did you pull it from?
Well, I'm trying to think of shows that have big vocabularies.
Oh, yeah, maybe. Good
Norm, I agree with you in theory.
What's the etymology of magnanimous?
That there's never too much popcorn in life. But I will tell you that there was too much popcorn. And it was the amount of popcorn I ate that day. Because I really was. Oh, but one of the refills was the best. When I got there was the machine was empty. So they had to wait for it to, pop some popcorn. So it was the fresh, hot, just popped. Oh my gosh. That was really good. You can make
noise. But
sorry, Brian?
You didn't say anything?
Are you talking to me?
The same temperature it always is.
Oh.
It's the same temperature it always is this time of day.
They're having a fight. Okay, actually, I'm going to turn the light on.
That's crazy.
We have so much to get to. And Brian and I also are drafting in our Dynasty League, and it's our pick, and we're just telling everyone we can't. And we got a trade offer for our pick. So we've been discussing that, and we have to do a podcast.
Do you know? Jay Brew answered the question. Jay Brew answered. Jay Brew, I was going to. I see that now. So my question is, so magnanimous, Magnus is great in Latin. Animus is soul. So
great soul.
magnanimous is a great soul. So what do
Mm.
you think magnificent is?
Probably great. I'm gonna guess great.
Magnus,
Then
yeah, same root
yeah,
there.
efficient. That I don't know
It's
because you haven't
like
told me yet.
it's like a verb add-on. It's making great.
It's like really great, or you're
So, but
making
like,
just so
but if we
great.
say that's magnificent, we're basically
Mm.
saying that that's making great.
I don't
Don't
think
know.
that's like this. I'm not that interested in this, but I know it is interesting for some people.
Oh,
It's always like weird when you're in those conversations where like everyone's into it. It's like when people talk about their vacations and they talk about, did you go to this place? Oh, I love that place. Did you go to this place? Yeah. Oh, that country's
vacation
the best
talk.
country.
When someone wants to tell me about the vacation like a day at a time, it's like
Oh, well, that's the word. Everyone hates that.
If you're gonna tell someone about your vacation, you've got to pick like the highlight, like the one
Sure.
thing, and like you've got to
100%.
know that like it might have been life changing for you, but like you've got about 73 seconds to tell me about it, and
No,
then I'm
totally.
moving on.
But I'm saying, Brian, something else that's maybe equally annoying to me is when I'm hanging out with a group of like, let's say 4 people, and one person is like, hey, I'm going to be going on vacation to this place. And then one of the people is like, I love that place. And then they just start talking about places they've been, but they're into
Places.
it. So it's not like anyone is being rude. It's like they're into it. And I'm just standing there like, I don't know what magnificent means, and I'm not interested, but I'm just going to hang out and pretend I am.
That's a really harsh reality for me to come back to where I'm really agreeing with you. Yeah, I hate it. That's so boring when people talk about that and then you bring it back to the thing that I was talking about. Oof. It's a real gut punch right there.
It's said with
you know,
love.
people talk about things you don't care about. Yeah, I do. Oh, I hate that. This is one of them. This guy.
All right.
And he's my friend.
Yeah, one of the best. I mean, I'm not saying I'm one of your best. You're one of my best. I don't know. Maybe I've gone down your rankings.
No, you just called yourself not one of my best, one of the best, one of the best friends, one of the best.
that you can have. I'm magnanimous to myself.
What? You're magnificent.
All right, let's do this. Let's do a show.
Oh, so we're doing an hour? Are we doing it
Now?
I'll just follow you. I don't know.
I'll do it until I feel like
Because we were
definitely I
going
want
to
to
do
be
like
done.
4 parts, but I don't think we're going to do 4 parts.
Let's do 90 minutes. Let's end at 10.
Okay. The 4th part would be boring if we're starting from like the most interesting to the least interesting.
Look, we'll go until
we're
I feel
talking
like
about,
we
like,
don't have anything left.
Blake Lizotte, as we were in our Discord
yeah, I
server
don't. I'm not
today.
gonna we're not gonna do a boring show. Like it's just every show we're done. We'll be like, is there enough for another show? And if yes, we'll do it. And if not, we'll be like, we're done. Throw it at the end of some show about something else. If people need to hear about Blake Lizotte, what team did Blake Lizotte go to now?
You don't know?
Let me look it
Pittsburgh.
up here.
Pittsburgh.
Oh man,
Pittsburgh.
That's huge. Pittsburgh really made some big signings.
Well, we were talking. John Newholt brought up some questions about. Well, he brought up some facts about Pittsburgh, and that brought me to some questions. Like, what the hell? What is going on?
They're in a tough situation. They really went in on Karlsson. And
that was a mistake.
Well, I don't think anyone could have predicted that they'd bring in Karlsson and then their power play would be putrid. I think I feel like that's like you expect at the very least that's going to make you have a good power play.
Karlsson keeps coming in to teams that are like losing their window.
Well, in San Jose, it looked like they were.
Yeah.
That was weird how that happened. Like the first year he was in, they went to the conference finals and everything looked good. I guess people underestimated how big losing Joe Pavelski would be.
And maybe Karlsson, you know what? Karlsson's just not the difference maker.
He's not
right?
a winner.
There's some. Well, I didn't say that. I think in Ottawa, he single-handedly took that team as far as they got with him.
All right, we should start the show. We should start the show.
Let's start the show.
Okay. I don't even have a joke ready. Okay, whatever. 2 guys who. Okay.
Or Megan.
I'm just gonna make it up. Okay. Yeah. Oh. Okay. Ready? Let me know when you're ready. Okay. Yeah. Oh no! I spilled my beer. Shit. Why did I drink a beer? I clearly can't handle it.
You know, what my favorite part of that was that like our mics are so good at picking up only us talking, but I loudly heard the beer bottle clinking.
Okay, my computer's still on. That's good. Okay. All right. Shit. I think that's okay.
Is this the show? Have we started
Do I
the
need
show?
do I need to put the computer in a bowl of rice?
I think you actually need to start filling the room with rice. You're still drinking the beer.
All right, now people hear us. Well, I just finished it. I don't want too risky to not drink it.
Who's on that bed last, by the way?
My parents were here over the weekend. Oh my god, do you want to hear something funny?
Which
we have
parent?
no time.
Both parents?
My mom and stepdad were here.
Oh, okay.
And then they had this. Okay, I'll say this really quickly, but they have this dog that they got. That's like a terrible dog. Like
Yeah,
just like
you won't go see them.
not
You won't
trained,
let the dog
like
near your
bites
daughter.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we told them like that dog's not. They came to visit for the weekend. We were like, that dog's not welcome here. So they brought the dog to whatever, like someone who could board her. Fine, good. Then their whole plan was then they were gonna go to visit my brother at his his wife has a cottage, like a family cottage in Wolf Island. So they like left here, and the plan was then to go for today and tomorrow. They're going to Wolf Island to be with my brother and his 2 kids, young kids. And they went and picked up the dog, and they like brought the dog to Wolf Island. Then Dina and I are making like dinner today. And then Dina is getting messages from my brother's wife that like the dog like bit like his son.
It's not
like,
funny. It's not funny.
like he's fine, but he's like now like afraid of the dog. And like my brother's wife is like so pissed, and like it's a whole thing. And it's like this dog is terrible. And my brother messaged me and is like you know, that dog's like never welcome here again. It's like they should have not let the dog go in the first place. But my mom was also like, stop bringing like this dog isn't. And she also talks about the dog so much. Like her whole visit was like she kept telling us about how like, oh, lady is doing really well. We're taking her to train. Like she's just not good like around people. But like with us, she's so good, and like she's so. And I'm sure she is. Like it's like stop trying to sell your dog to me. Like it's a bad dog. Like,
when is she gonna
I'm
move?
sorry.
Bad dog. When is she gonna move off of the dog? Never. She's committed.
She should. Maybe this will make the difference. If
Doesn't sound
no
like
one
it.
is ever willing to visit her,
What's
like
what's the dog's name?
Lady. It's a bad dog. Really bad. And I like dogs a lot.
Lady is a tramp.
Okay. Good one. Okay.
You don't mean that.
Okay. Let's start the show now.
You hated
'cause now
that.
we're really late. It was good. It was like a good reference to like a 50s Disney movie. An aspiring good girl. You should meet this dog, Pete. I like dogs a lot. This is the only dog I don't like. Okay. Yes! Welcome everybody to another episode of the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast, the longest fantasy. Yes! Welcome everybody to the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast, the longest running fantasy hockey podcast in the world, hosted by 2 guys who are going to continue podcasting about what happened in free agency until the end of time. I am your host, Elon Dubrovsky, and with me to break down as much as we can in this part 1 of a series of indefinite length of all the off-season shenanigans, it's my very good friend, the fantasy hockey robot, the Poobah prognostication, the IPP MVP himself, Brian Cum. Brian, how's it going?
I'm doing great. Like you just made a huge commitment to us, like by us until the end of
Did
time.
I?
You're also quoting Tupac, which I know was intentional. You've got his whole like lyrical database, and of course,
I was actually thinking of the song by it's a Weird Al, like will we oh no, it's the Yoda, the Yoda song, and it's like I know like we'll be making these movies till the end of time. It's because I forget what the verse was leading up to it, but that's actually what I was thinking of.
wow, I love that line in the Weird Al song.
Yoda, yo,
Yeah.
it's a good one.
It's
My favorite line in the song is, I know Darth Vader's really got you annoyed, but remember, if you kill him, then you'll be unemployed. Oh, my Yoda. That's a good line.
It's such a great line, and it really was great to articulate the fact that we'll be podcasting about fantasy hockey, not Weird Al or Star Wars themed items. Until we're very happy to be here. It's the summertime, it's the off season, so thanks everybody for listening, for tuning in. And there's honestly, this whole intro betrays the amount of action and eventful happening that we actually have to discuss on the it sounds like we're just killing time because there's not enough to talk about, but Elon, there's so much to talk about, we can't even cram it into tonight's episode.
Yeah, no, we're gonna record this. We're not gonna rush. That's the plan. It's like we've got a lot of stuff to get to. We're gonna start. Then after around an hour and a half, we'll be like, that was good. We'll come back for another episode, and we'll keep doing that until we have a pre-show meeting, or I don't think there's anything left to talk about, and then we'll move on to previewing the season or talking about the first week of the season, because we'll see how long this takes. But let's get going, Brian. So yeah, obviously a lot happened. You were able to read all about it at dobberhockey.com as they broke down every single trade and free agent signing. So check that out for their analysis, dobberhockey.com. I think we've got to start. I think it's pretty obvious where we're going to start, right? We got to go to Nashville. The biggest splash maybe I've ever seen in free agency it was one tweet, so with game day tweets, Shams and I, it was really fun. I was just watching my Twitter feed and just retweeting things to get it to populate the website for a few days, well, especially on July 1st, though. And I just had one tweet for Nashville that broke it all down. It was Pierre LeBrun was as reported earlier, but now a done deal. Steven Stamkos, Jonathan Marchessault, and Brady Shea all agreed to terms in Nashville. It had all the contract info. I was there you go. That knocks it out, and that's huge. So there's so much to dig into there. But yeah, Stamkos is locked in now, 4 years, $8 million. Marchessault, who I didn't even both of those guys, Stamkos and Marchessault, were players that I kind of just expected would re-sign with their teams. It just seemed weird to imagine them going somewhere else, but no. And then Brady Shea, also 7x7, going to the Predators. So, where do we start here? I guess let's look at the main guy, Steven Stamkos, okay? Because this is someone who, even though he's, into his 30s now, not the guy he once was, but is still coming off a really solid season. He still ended up, sorry, one sec. It's a really solid season. He still ended up with over a point per game, 81 points in 79 games, scored 40 goals. So you can't ask for much more. Sure, back in 21-22, he had 106 points. Since then, he's fallen back down to being only quote unquote a point per game guy. Here, though, 40 goals is a really nice milestone that he's only crossed 40 a few times in his career, maybe 5-6 times in a 15-year career. So Stamkos still has it. He's 34. Now he goes to Nashville. And I'd just love to start with him, though it's kind of hard because I guess everything is in context. But yeah, where do we draft Stamkos, in fantasy next year? Do we just kind of assume that stays the same? He goes from this amazing line in Tampa, obviously playing with Kucherov and Point, but now he gets to play with, Philip Forsberg and Jonathan Marchessault. So I guess I'm curious to get your take on how much of a downgrade this is, if any.
Yeah, I don't know yet. Nashville, we're the thing with Stamkos is he's leaving a certain situation, right? One where we were very comfortable projecting him at one point for 90, 95 points a season. And now the last couple of years, Stamkos has put up an 85-point pace. And we knew what we were getting from Stamkos in Tampa. And honestly, even last year, Nashville's always been a little hard for me to get a handle on, but now it's really hard for me to get a handle on Nashville. Even going back to last year when we were looking at Tommy Novak and Luke Evangelista, Cody Glass, Philip Tomasino, all these up and comers who we thought were going to come in and have a chance to be impactful. Ultimately, none of them really were. Juuso Parsonen's another name. Novak had his moments, but not at all in the way that we would have hoped for. And instead, we saw a career year from Gustav Nyquist and Ryan O'Reilly, just rekindling the hottest parts and moments of their career in Nashville. Philip Forsberg took a step forward. So I feel nothing about this team in Nashville has been stable year. And this is me talking about last year. And now this year, they've added Stamkos to the mix. They've added Marchessault to the mix. They've added Brady Shea on the back end too. I think Alex Carrier, was he also?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They signed Alex Carrier.
like you're laughing, but he could be a top four defenseman, right? And that there's some impact there
Hmm.
for like what that actually does to the on ice product.
And hey, if you want, for completion's sake, if you wanted to say
Yeah,
everything they did, they also extended UC Saros. So there was some question of whether Saros was gonna be sticking around or get traded. But like Saros is like 8 years longer. They also signed Wedgwood as the backup. So Askarov's
yeah,
probably not happy about that. But so we'll see if they trade Askarov or if he just gets another year in the minors. Also, I will mention patron Norm's cousin, Nick Blankenberg, got signed as a free agent and is going to be going to Nashville from Columbus. Maybe one day he'll make an impact. So yeah, Nashville
yeah.
did a
And
lot.
Vinny Hinostroza, also Kiefer Bellows. Like these are names, these are guys we know, right? So all of a sudden, so last year the word on Nashville was there's so much space for these guys to show up and become someone. And now it's like there's so I think what I'm trying to say here is that I don't even know how to project Nashville necessarily because this team looks so new to me, let alone try and figure out what one of those new pieces is going to do. I will say that if Stamkos had stayed in Tampa, I think I'd feel confident having, put him around the same 85 point pace again. Like I'm looking at his 5-on-5 numbers and I'm not seeing any like notable sign of decline. Like it wasn't his best year. It wasn't his worst year either. The shooting percentage while Stamkos was on the ice was the lowest it's been. I'm looking back in almost a decade, but that's not necessarily Stamkos's fault either. And the threat level was about what it's always been for Stamkos on the ice. So again, I don't think it was his best year. I don't think he's just coming off his best years. I don't think he's just coming off his worst years. I think we're seeing we're seeing a natural decline. But he's not falling off a cliff, I think is what I'm trying to say here as he enters his age 34 season. So Stamkos in Nashville, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to take the safe bet and say point per game player. I think I'm curious to know exactly where he slots in that lineup. And again, this is where sorting out the whole situation gets tricky because we've seen Stamkos as a center. We've seen Stamkos play as a winger with Braden Point. So I'm not sure exactly. I have to imagine he's top line center. Like he bumps Ryan O'Reilly, right? Ryan O'Reilly can go play on the
Oh,
second line center. I don't know, but O'Reilly, Philip Forsberg, and Nyquist had such great chemistry. So why maybe they should stay together. But then on the
yeah, you could
second
do
line, you've got
Stamkos.
Stamkos, Marchessault, and who? Parsonen, Sissons,
Well,
Novak.
we had a question in the chat, yeah, from Pete. Like Tommy Novak was looking good as a center. Like maybe Stamkos. I don't think Stamkos. I'm of the impression that Stamkos isn't being brought in to play center. I would guess, yeah, maybe they do. They stick with the top line as it was, at least to start. And again, with all this speculation of what the lines are going to be, like we have to remember, like even if what we see in training camp is what we suspect, like things could change so quickly if it doesn't work out. But I would think, like, yes, if I was the coach, yes, stick with what worked. Then get Stamkos and Marchessault together. I think Tommy Novak is the center there, and I think that bodes well for. Yeah, Chris asked if. Or no, sorry. Pete asked, "Is Novak going to be overdrafted now as a third wheel?" Like that's a whole. I mean, it depends how high now people are going to go, but I think that he does become like a type of player that maybe you do get a little bit more interested in if it does work out. Like we're saying that he's going to be centering Steven Stamkos. Of course, the other big question is on the power play, right? Because last year it was pretty set. Like you had that top line basically O'Reilly, Forsberg, and Nyquist, and then Josi on defense, and there was like a fourth person who was sometimes like Cody Glass, and sometimes I don't even remember like some other people. Luke Evangelista, did he ever get a shot there? I don't know. But anyways, now I see like five forwards for four spots. Like like Forsberg for sure, Stamkos for sure. I'd assume Marchessault is sticking on that top power play. We haven't talked about him yet. But yeah, I think Ryan O'Reilly, Marchessault, and Nyquist, right? One of them gets bumped off, which so maybe like in the end, like this is maybe bad news for like a Nyquist who, like by name value, like I'm, because there's a whole other way you can look at it in terms of like what roles do they play on the power play and who fits where, blah blah blah. But in terms of name value, I would think Nyquist would be the one that gets bumped, and he's coming off this like kind of rejuvenating season for his career. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's going to be a really interesting thing where I think it's almost like we have to now be a little bit nervous. There's going to be some big winners and some big losers in our fantasy drafts for who we take from Nashville from those three of O'Reilly, Nyquist, and Marchessault, I think. But maybe we could jump to Marchessault quickly, who, like I said, like it looked like he was going to be in Vegas forever. He was coming off a really great season, right? Like 69 points, 42 goals, one of his best ever. Like his first year in Vegas, he paced for 80. He had 75 points in 77 games. So he never got close to that again. But here's like basically 70 and like a lot more goals. In terms of fantasy, you could probably in the cupful, Marchessault was like just as valuable, if not more, than he was in his first year in Vegas. And he's 33, kind of similar to Stamkos, like coming off a great year, scored a lot of goals. How many goals also, like, there's like Forsberg also scored a lot of goals last year. Like, I don't think they're going to have 340 goal scorers. So probably someone takes a step back. I kind of wonder if maybe Marchessault is someone who it's exciting, but I wonder if because also it's like, I wonder if he just had some magic in Vegas, like just worked really well for him there. He's someone I'd be nervous about. And maybe I'd say his value could potentially drop. And I don't know if he's a guarantee to be on that top power play.
I think that's the proposition at the draft table with drafting Nashville guys. Like, it's exciting to draft them because of the new look, but at some point you need to draw that red line and say, I don't know if this guy's going to be on the top power play, so I'm stepping back. And I think that red line, the only guys above it are Forsberg, Stamkos, and, well, Roman Josi, but he's not in this equation, like in this particular discussion. And then, yeah, Nyquist, Marchessault, and O'Reilly, I think are all in some kind of danger of losing out. I have a hunch it's not going to be O'Reilly, but that's purely a hunch. For Marchessault, I'm looking at his power play production last year because I'm sort of just going to control for, like, we're going to have to hedge a little because we don't know if he's going to play on the power play. And to Marchessault's credit, he hasn't feasted on the power play the last couple of years. And keep in mind, in Vegas, up until last season, he had played basically on 50% like power play 1A, 1B units. So he's never really relied heavily on power play time to get to his, 65, 70 points that he has for the last few seasons. But he still has gotten, like last year he had 17 power play points. The year before he paced for about the same. A lot of his shots can come on the power play too. So I think that's another piece to consider here is you might be losing some power play points. You might be losing some shots on goal as well. And you also might not. So I think when you're trying to evaluate, like I think for Marchessault, Nyquist, and O'Reilly, you're going to look at what they did last year and you're going to knock a little bit off of what their upside is. And when you draft them, you hope that they can exceed it. But you don't want to reach for them assuming it's automatic. And Elon, you spoke specifically about Marchessault's goal scoring. He had 42 goals last year in 82 games. He had a career high 16% shooting percentage. I rounded up just a titch to get there. And that's because at 5-on-5, he shot nearly 15% through the last, I'm going to go backwards for his last 5 years of shooting. 10%, 10%, 11%, 8%, 7%. So 15% is definitely an outlier. Nothing really seems to have changed in his shot rates or expected goals. So I'm going to expect that number to regress and that Marchessault returns to being, well, about a 30 goal scorer if he keeps his power play goals, which he might not. Which then means, maybe he's in the 25 goal range and you're looking at more of a 60-point player. So on draft day, I think that's about how I'd value Marchessault. But I would know if I'm drafting him amongst other 60-point players who are unlikely to get on the top power play, I would still, take Marchessault as a guy who I might actually who might actually get a chance for extended time with the men advantage.
Yeah, so there's definitely big upside there. You're just taking a bit more of a risk than maybe some other people who obviously have like established roles on their teams. I guess we also have to talk about Brady Shea quickly, someone who I know anytime I brought him up on the podcast, generally, correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, I believe like your vibe has been, I don't really believe it's going to last whenever he's gone on a hot streak and he's been available in free agency for people. But at the end of the day, last season, career year for Shea. Great year for him to have a career year because it locked him in for a 7x7 contract, which I don't think anyone would have expected a couple years ago. But yeah, 47 points in 80 games for Brady Shea. Like, he wasn't on the top power play in Carolina. He was once in a while. But, like, when you look at frozen tools here, I'm seeing overall, like, 20% power play time. So it's not like he's getting a downgrade. Is there any chance Brady Shea can do this again on Nashville?
Uh, what do you want to hear? Like you well, because you've been a big Brady Shea fan. Like you've been very out loud in
I like
support
the
of Brady
hits.
Shea.
I mean, sorry, I like the shots.
Yeah.
He like shoots a lot for a defenseman. It seems. He goes on hot streaks. I like him as someone who I get. You know, when we're doing the podcast, also usually the context is like if he's in free agency, how awesome is that you can get this like guy who's shooting. You know, but now it's like a little different. If we're talking about, you know, we're drafting a dynasty cap league right now. It's actually our pick. But we're like the deadbeats here recording a podcast instead of making everybody wait. But I feel like I definitely will not. I don't want to show our hand here. I don't have any interest in drafting Brady Shea and taking on a 7x7 contract for a 30-year-old. But in terms of a 1-year league next year, I guess I don't leave him undrafted. Like I'd like to have him if I can get him as like my last D, my third or fourth D. But yeah, I'm
Yeah,
not.
and if Nashville is as exciting as they turn out to be, like if they are really an offensive team, well, first off, there's no chance Shea's on the top power play unit unless Yossi gets injured, and that doesn't happen all that often. Shea didn't see a lot of top power play time in Carolina either. He actually overperformed on the power play last year. They had 12 power play points with only a 21% share of power play time, so that's not something that he's going to be able to repeat. It's crazy. Do you know Brady Shea went 4 consecutive seasons without registering a power play point? 4 consecutive seasons. But he also barely
got any time.
Yeah, so like that. But it's interesting that
tracks.
Yeah, but then he did. I guess I'm trying to decide how interesting that is. I think Brady Shea. Listen, he was a 25, 30-point player, and then he became a 40-point player, and I think he's probably. I think I'd still feel comfortable putting him as a 40-point player. One thing that changed for him to become more of a point producer was he was putting more shot attempts on net. And in fact, last year in Carolina, he attempted more shots per 60 minutes than he has at any moment in his career. In fact, he set a career high in shot attempts per 60 minutes now in 4 consecutive years. And they've been like pretty. They haven't been tiny jumps. Like they've been incremental, but like noticeable jumps. So I feel like there is this offensive side to him. I feel like he is kind of unlocking it and knows how to use it. And we'll see. I don't see a path for Shea to have much more than a 40-point season without some friendly variance. But if he can still keep putting, a couple shots on net per game and throw in a hit and a point every other night on average, and be like, for what it's worth, if you're in a plus minus league, he's a plus 44 player over his last 3 seasons. So put all that together, and you've got somebody who, like you said, Elon, I think is right at the tail end of your draft. Like if you've missed out on defensemen and you have empty spots that you need to fill, like that you can't, like you're like in the cupful. If you have like you probably want 2 or 3D coming out of the draft. If you don't have your second or third, then you might consider taking Shea late or churning until you find someone, but you're risking losing someone who could just basically kind of be on your roster set and forget without a whole lot of upside. So to put that all into perspective, Brady Shea, as valuable as he was in Carolina, which is to say not a necessity for your fantasy roster, but depending on your format, it might be all right to consider him a reliable guy.
Yeah, a good maybe solid guy you can draft late and kind of set your watch to, but don't expect too much. I think I agree with you. Of course, the other defenseman, Pete is asking in the chat, does all of these free agent signings make Roman Josi even more exciting, maybe even better than Makar? Look, Yosi's been very close to Makar already these last couple of years. So I feel like definitely it's possible that Roman Josi can put up similar fantasy points as Cale Makar. Obviously, the downside is Roman Josi is 34 years old and Cale Makar is 25 years old. So they're going to probably be trending in different directions. I'm not saying I have any reason to believe, unless Brian has something to say, to indicate that Josie's gonna do it, be any worse next season. But probably I would still take Makar just for the upside and avoid Josie if I'm just comparing those two for the potential downside of him slowing down just due to age. But yeah, it's a great situation, and I think this definitely cements him as he's definitely top 5D to draft. It just depends, like you could take like a Dahlin, a Bouchard, there's these like young
I would.
defensemen.
Yeah.
And it's like, you decide when you want to decide. Like it's very hard to predict when someone's going to sort of get worse due to age, but it probably won't be a steep decline. And now obviously Yossi's going to have extra good players to play with. Though I will just say sometimes you can't just, and it's hard for us, but like just on paper, it looks good, right? Like we were just talking before the show, like on paper, Erik Karlsson to Pittsburgh looked good. Looked like that power play was going to be insane to have Crosby and Malkin and Gensel and like Karlsson all in the same power play. And then didn't they have like the worst power play in the league for like the first few months of the year? Like they just couldn't figure it out. So I'm not saying that's going to happen, but it's definitely possible. Like you need more than just big names. Like they also have to figure out how to work together and score power play goals. So not a guarantee that it's like any better for Josi. That's my opinion anyways.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And yeah, like I would be more comfortable with Roman Josi just coming in and playing on the same team that he put up 85 points on last season in what seemed to me to be like a reasonably sustainable way at 23 goals, which was a career high, tied a career high from a couple years back, which I'm not sure he can quite get all the way up there again. And maybe, you think of him as like a 75-point player instead of the 85 points that he put up last year. But he's dependable. He puts a ton of pucks on net. The last 3 seasons, he's averaged 3.5, 4, and 3.5 shots on goal per night. You can get the very odd shorty, but in leagues where that counts, that could, tip the scales in your favor, especially in a categories league. So Elon, would still be into Roman Josi. Like, I drafted him last year. Maybe this is it. I have an affinity for him. He was great for my team.
He was great.
There were times where I prefer, like, I'm like, oh, I'm glad I got him and not Makar because Makar was having these injury things again. I still have him a tier above your Bouchards and your Daldins for what it's worth.
Very fair.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's move on, okay? Because I guess we probably I think we could do like more time on Nashville. We could talk about the goaltending situation, but I think we should probably move on to Tampa, I guess, who loses Steven Stamkos. Doesn't, the sting isn't that harsh. Like maybe for the fans, it's weird to see their longtime captain leave the team, but they traded for and then signed Jake Gensel to a long-term $9 million contract for 7 years. So that's like very exciting because Jake Gensel, and you know how we always say in the offseason, like when someone goes to a new team, like there might be an adjustment time. Like I'd be a little nervous. Like Jake Gensel, the nice thing about him is he went to Carolina and he was incredible right from the start in a new situation. That gives me like more confidence that now he can go to another situation in Tampa, and he's proven himself at least once to not lose a beat. And this was in the middle of the season. Now he has all off season to train, and so I'm very excited. And like it's just such a tasty spot. Like he just takes the Stamkos spot on the power play, right? Like I don't know if they shuffle around the actual positions, but you're gonna have Kucherov, you're gonna have Point, and now you're gonna have Gensel and Hedman. We'll talk about him in a second. He got extended, and Sergachev got traded. But and then they'll have their fifth person who will, I guess, be a Nick Paul or a Hagel or whatever. But that power play is good. And I would be very surprised if it's not equally as good without Gensel. And I think Gensel, also don't forget even strength. Like Kucherov is just so good at getting assists. Like he's such a great playmaker. I don't see why Jake Gensel, who's coming off a 94-point pace season, like I don't know how crazy to get. Like I'm really into him. And I know this is like a little off brand for me because I'm not supposed to be, generally I like to try not to get too excited about people going to new teams, but I don't see why Gensel can't be like a, similar pace, like 95 to 100-point pace and like 45 goals. Like, am I being too outlandish here? Like, assuming Kucherov is the same and Braden Point are the same, I feel like Gensel seems like a slightly better version than what Stamkos was last year.
Yeah, and if Stamkos could put up 85 points reliably, then why wouldn't we expect Gensel, who's paced for over 90 points in 2 of his last 3 seasons and 3 of his last 5, to do the same thing? I'm with you. One thing I'll be interested to see is, like, Gensel has always, well, you talked about the Pittsburgh power play, like, on a separate kind of tangent, but Gensel's basically never been more than, like, a low 20s has been his power play point totals. And I see maybe it's not fair to correct. I don't know if it's apples to apples here when I look at Stamkos, but Stamkos' power play production in the last 3 seasons, 39, 35, and 36 power play points. So I think where I'm curious is, can Gensel add like another 10 power play points just by being in Tampa? Or does Stamkos leaving the unit actually change things? This is something I'll be interesting to see. I don't think it ultimately changes where I'm going to project Gensel by a whole lot. Maybe I'll try and split the difference there and offer him another, 5 points instead of 10 on the power play to sort of catch up, to make up the difference to what we could expect from that super lethal Lightning power play that we've seen for so many years. But other than that, yeah, I'm going to take Gensel on the high end of things. He turns 30 in October, which he looks great, by the way, for 30 years old. You'd never know. I want to know what he looks like at 40. It'll probably be similar. Guys like this age very well.
You mean just his looks?
Physically.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, aesthetically.
I didn't know that Jake Gensel was known for being like such a stud. Like, when people say like who are the best looking hockey players, it's not like not to diss Gensel, but he doesn't like go to the top of lists.
I know. I'm just saying he looks very youthful in his picture.
I guess so. Yeah, you're right. I'm looking now. Yeah, he does.
Like if you told me like guess his age, I'd be like
wide-eyed and bushy-tailed.
Yeah, yeah. So let's hope he can bring some of that youthful energy into Tampa with him.
Yeah.
And like I said, if he could put up 90 points in Pittsburgh on a power play that never, I mean, to be fair, sometimes he was pacing for like 25 plus power play points, but he was injured or the season was shortened. But I'm gonna put him somewhere between 90 and 100 points to do what Stamkos did, plus a little more than that, plus a little more power play production than he's historically seen.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. Like, obviously, there's the chance it doesn't click, but I think it's unlikely. I'm really into Gensel. And, of course, the other big thing in Tampa is they traded Sergachev to the Utah Hockey Club, as we're calling them, for, I guess, mainly, like, they got Geeky, who's a good prospect, got a couple picks, JJ Moser, Janice Moser. Is it JJ Moser? Yeah, I know it's Janice is his full name. But anyway. Giannis, I apologize. Okay. But I feel like the key takeaway is, of course, just Victor Hedman maintains all of his value, because obviously if this trade didn't happen, then we'd go into next year thinking, okay, with Sergachev healthy, maybe this is going to be another year where Sergachev could steal power play time from Hedman. But Hedman is coming off one of his top seasons. He had 76 points in 78 games. I see he had 85 just a couple years before that. This has been a weird stretch for Hedman. 85 points, then 49, and then 76. And that 49 was in the year that Sergachev took over for a while on the power play. So I don't know what happened there. But now Hedman is extended. He's got no competition at all. I guess we could have a conversation about who gets the second power play, but I feel like who cares, because that power play barely plays. But maybe JJ Moser is now the second, like, or him or Darren Radish. This defense, I should finish. Darren Radish is the other guy who I know got some power play time last year. You look at the defense on Tampa. They also acquired Ryan McDonough. So they've got McDonough, Hedman, Cernak, Nick Perbix, Darren Radish, and JJ Moser. That's what I'm seeing on Cap Friendly, which is still around, by the way. That's nice. I wonder how long this will last. So at least for this episode. So I don't know. I don't know how like Tampa looks as a team overall, but anyways, I'm excited about Gensel. Obviously, Victor Hedman. I guess too obvious of a question. Like Victor Hedman still super. Like, is he in the top 5? Like if we were just saying, like, is Hedman in the group after Josi and Makar? I said a group of like Dahlin and Bouchard, and I don't know if you want to throw like Adam Fox there. Maybe like people are screaming that I'm missing someone. But like, is Hedman like right there, like equal to those guys, or a step below? Like, it's nice that we don't have to worry about any competition anymore.
It is nice. I felt like that worry was behind us from what we saw last season with Hedman on the top unit, and like, there's no one who's really going to take time. I was going to say let's not speak too soon just to make sure, but you're right. I don't even know that it's worth going deep into saying like could Moser, by the way, who's, I don't know if it is Janice or Yanis. He's Swiss and his middle name is Jérôme, and it would be cool if the first J was silent, or like not silent, was the Y sound, and the second J was the J sound. That's neither here nor there. I'm sorry. We had an etymology talk on the show before we went to air, and I'm still fired up about it, as I always would be. So yeah, no, but we're not going to go down that route. So I guess the question is what Victor Hedman did last season repeatable? And at 5-on-5, It sure looks that way. He had one of his more productive seasons at 5-on-5. In fact, I'm looking at a points per 60 measure. It was his most productive, and yeah, his points participation was a little high. His shooting percentage was also a little high, and his shot rates and shot attempt rates were sort of down from what he's historically been used to. So I'm actually going to revise my answer and say at 5-on-5, I think I expect a little bit, not a ton, like a small amount of regression for Hedman. And then on the power play, I mean, things looked pretty business as usual for Hedman on the power play. The power play produced, and he found his way to 31 power play points in 78 games. So I think if I were looking at an age 34 Hedman next season and projecting him, seeing that he had 80 points last season, I think it's worth noting, Elon, that is, it's easy to say, well, Hedman has been an 80 or 80 plus player in 2 of his last 3 seasons, and then look at the rest of his career and see he has never touched 80 points ever. Other than that, not to say I haven't done all. Oh no, he hasn't even paced for it. So I'm not gonna get caught in thinking and looking at the recent 3 years for Hedman and being, oh yeah, like he had one down year in the middle. Now he's just an 80-point player. No, I'm not there. I think I'm going to go back to where I've generally been on Hedman, which is a 70-point player. And I think that's fair enough. I don't think I need to regress anymore based on age. I think I expect him to be on the top power play without question. I think I expect some regression from last season. And so, Elon, no, I wouldn't put him all the way up there in that top 5 group because I think there's more upside in that top 5 group than what Hedman has to offer, even though he has he has reached his upside in 2 of the last 3 seasons. That doesn't mean he's likely to do it again.
Interesting. Okay, so that'll be fun to see play out over in Tampa. They lost Duclair. They traded. Well, Duclair, I guess, just came out at the end of the year. They traded Tanner Jeannot. I don't know how much more there is. So let's move to another team. Let's move to a team that we've mentioned in passing in Vegas, right? Because Marcia So we discussed, who did not re-sign with Vegas, and he says they didn't want him enough. Something like they wanted him for only 4 years, and he wanted 5 years, something like that. So he's gone to UFA. Chandler Stevenson, he's gone. Also, Amadio, Alec Martinez. Remember they had Mantha at the end of last year? He didn't re-sign there. Whatever. We also talked about already how Vegas traded away Logan Thompson. But I guess they've kind of figured that out. They signed Ilya Samsonov, so he'll get another shot to be, I guess, the backup. And who knows, with Aiden Hill, Akira Schmid they brought in for a trade. So that's the goalie situation. We'll discuss that on Schmore Goalies board. I'd assume Hill is the starter to start, and we'll figure it out from there. But yeah, they've lost a lot of players, I think. We had a question in the chat here. Trev said, aside from getting 40 games from Mark Stone, who exactly is Jack Eichel even going to play with on this team? It's a good question. I'm curious to know, if you look at the depth chart now for Vegas, you have Eichel and you have Mark Stone, and then you have, who's their next best player for fantasy? Oh, they've Hurdle, of course. Sorry, everybody. Oh, dumb. Okay, Hurdle's very good. Of course, they signed him. And then, we've got Shea Theodore, Noah Hannafin, and Alex Pietrangelo on D. But yeah, if we wanted to predict, let's say as an exercise to get this started, predict the top power play for Vegas next year, maybe it's Noah Hannafin. Let's assume 1 defenseman. So you have Eichel, Stone, Hurdle, room for 1 more. I feel like it's a real crapshoot. You can get William Karlsson back. Alex Holtz, who I said on the last show we did, I was surprised that he was acquired for so cheap because he's a former top 10 pick. I didn't realize that everyone was so down on him. I wonder if Vegas, he's the next misfit. Maybe you get rid of Marcia So, you get Alex Holtz, and all of a sudden Holtz turns into the Marcia So and becomes a 40-goal scoring winger. So I'm not predicting it on the show. I'm just saying I wouldn't be surprised to see someone like an Alex Holtz get a shot on that top power play. So he'll be my sleeper of the episode so far until Brian tells me that I'm being dumb.
I don't know that you're being dumb, just because we haven't seen enough of Alex Holtz, except that his value apparently has really, really sunk since. I remember draft day when Holtz was picked. What was it, 7th overall? And I think if I'm remembering this right, the feeling was that he had actually slipped a little bit in the draft. I'm trying to see who was taken right before him. Jamie Drysdale, Jake Sanderson, Lucas Raymond, and then Stutzle, Byfield, Lafreniere. So Holt seemed like a good get at the time. But New Jersey just has not given him a whole lot of opportunity. He's averaged last season, he played all 82 games and averaged 11 and a half minutes a night. Towards the end, like in the very last game of the season, Holtz played 17 minutes. A couple weeks before that, he played 18. And those were the high water marks, really. He played, like, there were a couple strings where he played. There was a string earlier, like late in November, where he was seeing above 15 minutes a night on a regular basis. That lasted about 6 or 7 games. But really, outside of that, he was not really put in much of a position at all to succeed or do a whole lot. He played a little bit with Jack Hughes and Eric Howla. Otherwise, was playing with Michael McLeod and Curtis Lazar, a little bit of Timo Meier. Like, he was just sort of bouncing all over the lineup. The point I'm trying to make here is that for whatever reason, the Devils did not see a whole lot of reason to give Holtz much of a shake. I'm trying to think of their record in developing prospects, and I don't think they have like I'm not sure they've had a whole lot of shots at developing a prospect of Holtz's pedigree. So I'm not really sure what to make of it either. To me, I wonder why he spent most of the year not getting a shot in the AHL, for what it's worth. Like, Holtz as a pro in the minors has been productive, which doesn't necessarily mean a whole lot, right? But basically a point per game player in 21-22 and then a little bit of 22-23. So I'm excited. I'm looking forward to seeing what Holtz can offer as a fresh start. If you're asking, but your question, Elon, was who is most likely to be like the next most biggest fantasy impact at forward after Eichel and Hurdle, and we're not counting Stone. Yeah, I thought you were going to go Barbashev, to be honest.
Yeah, maybe.
Just because I think he's the most likely to play in the top 6 with one of these guys, and I'm not sure that I can be certain that Holtz will be in the top 6 or Victor Olofsson or I don't know, Dorofiev.
Well, there's William Karlsson. I guess he's probably the most obvious chalk pick. As like, he's
as the third line center. And
second line. Oh, because there's Eichel, first line, Hurdle, second line. I don't know. Yeah.
And like Hurdle and Eichel don't move to the wing, and neither does Karlsson. Like, these three are like very like one, like they are singular centers.
Man, so like we're talking about how like shallow they are. Now imagine who Karlsson is playing with as the third line center. It might not be fun. Maybe they at least give him the top power play. Yeah, Vegas all of a sudden looks pretty not good.
You know what, Elon, though? That's an interesting point, that maybe William Karlsson finds his way back onto the top power play unit somehow. If they have use for 3 centers there, or they go too deep. There's a lot of ways. Nashville has changed a lot in that they've added a lot, and Vegas has become like they look. I don't know. I'm curious to know how we perceive this team against how we perceived that expansion Vegas team, right? Like, there were a lot of nobodies who
now we've got superstars. It's like studs and duds. This is like a fantasy draft, an auction draft where you spent all your money on Eichel and Hurdle and Hannafin and Theodore and Pietrangelo and Mark Stone, and then you were like, oh shoot, I still have to fill out the rest of my roster. And so here we are. That'll be a fun team to watch. But everything you said about Alex Holtz, just to circle back to that, it's like, he should get an opportunity, right? It's now like he might just not be that good, and that's why he didn't get the time in New Jersey, but it might have also been that they just didn't have space for him. So now we'll find. And I know he has defensive liabilities. I'm sure prospect people and people who are actually watching these games could tell us specifically about his game style, but you would think if Alex Holtz is good, like, this is his chance. He should be able, there's room in the top 6, there's room on the top power play. It's just a matter now of if he can get it. So could be fun. Any quick thoughts on Samsonov? The goaltending situation, like, is there a goal? Like, are you like, oh, now for sure Hill? Because we talked about the Logan Thompson trade, and then we were like, oh, let's not dive too much into it because there's going to be free agency. And so now that we know that the tandem is probably Hill and Samsonov, maybe Schmid and Samsonov battle for the backup job in camp, are we like now like Aiden Hill is like super valuable, or are you just more like this could really go anyway, and I'm not too excited about any of them?
I'm gonna lean with that. Like, I know Aiden Hill has been solid, and I need to like clarify that because I doubted long enough that Adin Hill was a number one goalie, and I think there were moments, and I admit them, that I even doubted Adin Hill was a number two goalie in the NHL from what he'd been showing. But good for him. And I don't mean to necessarily doubt him. Last year, basically the last 2 seasons in Vegas, Adin Hill has played about as well as you would expect an average NHL goalie to, which is again over and above what I thought Adin Hill would be able to do. So good on him. I think there's room for Samsonov to do better. And so that's why I'm not going to overinvest in it. And of course, there's room for Samsonov to do worse. He can be wildly inconsistent, as we've seen. He actually had a really great season 2 years ago, and like his first season in Toronto, Ilya Samsonov played 13 save points above his expected Fenwick save percentage. Last season, Samsonov was also at 5-on-5 above his expected save percentage. So I can see both of these. Adin Hill seems at least more consistent of the two. Like, he might never be outstanding on a regular basis, but he'll at least be good. And Samsonov seems to fluctuate wildly between being good and not. So I would say that's all going to add up to a goaltending situation that's difficult to predict. I think if I'm trying to guess who's going to get more games outright, that Adin Hill as the incumbent does have the advantage. So we'll give him that. But outside of that, I'm not sure he's going to start more than 50. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think it's really going to be like these goalies are going to get opportunities to show. Like, it's like I don't think there's anything too entrenched. Like, Adin Hill's kind of entrenched, but I think that if they'll want to give their other guys a chance potentially as well. But also, there's definitely like this is a kind of pick you might like if you're like someone who likes to fade goalies. And if Adin Hill is lasting, like, and it's deep in the draft, and people are kind of down on Vegas as a team, and it's like, I don't know, like, Adin Hill could just emerge as like a volume starting goalie. If like Samsonov is as bad as he was last year, and Akira Schmid isn't ready, then those are sometimes hard to find. So I think there's like you put an asterisk beside Hill in Schmorgoli's board. It's like we've got like starter potential, and there's fewer and fewer goalies like that every year. Like, there's a lot of teams where we just know right off the bat that they're not going to get a volume of games just because that's not the plan the team's going with. But here, it's definitely possible. Chris in the chat is saying, I think William Karlsson will be a winger. So maybe, and then he could be potentially top 6 and top power play. So who knows? He thinks Roy will be a center. So we'll find out more in training camp, of course. Oh, Shams is mentioning they've invested a lot in D. Vegas we're talking about, so that could be good for Adin Hill. Yeah, if they're not trading Theodore, and they've got Theodore, Pietrangelo, and Hanifin, that's pretty solid. They lost
and McNabb.
And McNabb, right? So they've
and
lost Alec Martinez
and Haig. Like they have a solid decor.
A lot more pucks are going to go to the goalie with Alec Martinez not there. He blocks a lot, so now the goalie's going to have to actually make some of those saves from Alec Martinez making those blocks. But maybe I think you've talked about it on the podcast before, but just because a defenseman gets a lot of blocks doesn't mean they're like especially great defensively. Maybe it's better that they, didn't let the play get to the point where they had to make a block in the first place. Okay, so we've talked about 3 teams here. Let's take a break. I'm having fun. We'll go for another 45 minutes or so. Next up, after the break, let's go to the team that got Mikhail Sergachev from Tampa. So we'll get to that in just a sec. You're listening to Keeping Karlsson.
To find out who that team is, stay tuned.
Yeah. All right, welcome back, everybody. And yeah, we're going along. We're going to get to every team eventually. Like I said, might not be this episode, but I'm looking forward to talking about the Utah Hockey Club, the former Arizona Coyotes, who this is maybe my one of my Achilles heels here, Brian. Sometimes I get into a team, and I feel like a lot of years now I've been maybe Arizona will be a little better than we expected, and then it doesn't tend to always work out. But I don't know. I'm kind of interested in what's going on in Utah right now. They brought in, obviously the biggest acquisition is trading for Mikhail Sergachev, and aside from that, I think the big thing with this team is just they've got these guys like Dylan Gunther and Logan Cooley, really exciting prospects, and if they can become stars in the league, and now they've got this great defenseman in Sergachev, I don't know. we'll see what could happen, and maybe this could. But I guess the big question, of course, not just about the team, but for fantasy, is okay. Mikhail Sergachev, a guy who had that one amazing season on Tampa, like he's been a good, and especially for peripherals leagues, like Sergachev has been a solid guy in fantasy for a while. But in 2023-24, he or 2022-23, apologize, 64 points in 79 games for Sergachev. It was a breakout season. Seemed like he had like taken top power play from Hedman, and he was going to just go off and be a star potentially. And then last year, just like a really bummer year for him. He got injured. He only ended up with 19 points in the 34 games he did play. So now we get a nice fresh start for Mikhail Sergachev. The only question is that top power play his? Who knows? Because they also, of course, have Sean Durzi, who held that spot all season. So I guess I'm really interested in turning to you, Brian, and you can look into like how did Durzi do? Durzi was just acquired that year from LA, where he was the year before. So do you think Durzi showed last season that he's like worthy of being the incumbent and potentially holding top power play, or is this an acquisition of Sergachev like a clear no? Now Sergachev is taking over. Like Durzi, you had your shot. You weren't amazing. We're gonna definitely try Sergachev now and see how that goes. And I'm curious, and obviously the corollary is like, how exciting does that make Mikhail Sergachev if he is top power play to start next season on Utah?
I have to think that Utah didn't acquire Mikhail Sergachev to be anything but their guy. Like Sean Durzi, still young. Well, Sergachev's also still young. He's 26 years old. Remember the like Sergachev for Drouin trade, right? Like that was the trade.
Feels like it was so long ago.
I know.
I think Sergachev was like 18 at that point.
He must. Well, he's 26 now, so like he's still young.
Early days of the podcast, being like really excited about what Drouin's gonna do in Montreal.
Yeah.
Alas.
I think. No, I feel like. Oh no, we'd have to go back and check the tape, but I think we were as interested in Sergachev and what he would do in Tampa.
I remember being super smug and feeling smart for a year. Like, I remember that Sergachev went to Tampa, and then this is the year before the trade. And I remember a lot of people were saying, like, watch out for Sergachev. He's going to be amazing on the Habs. And then he, like, didn't even make the team. And we had said on the podcast, like, all these people are saying that you should, like, draft Sergachev. I don't think so. And then he did make the team, and I was like, look how smart I am. These prospect people, they're crazy. They always, like, overvalue their prospects. And so, yeah, I guess those people were a year early, but Sergachev turned out pretty darn good. And here we are 8 years later. And how are you going to project? Let's assume, obviously, that he's healthy. He's overcome the latest. I guess we could check the latest on game day tweets just in terms of like any tweets about his health and how he's recovered. I know he had a surgery. But at this point, Sergachev, let's see here. So there's the trade tweet, of course. And before that, Sergachev on if that injury will affect his offseason, he said, I'm cleared now. I'm going to have a small procedure to take some of the hardware out. It's going to take 2 weeks to rehab, but it's going to be a longer summer for me. I'm going to start skating sooner because I missed. And then there's a ... because I missed pretty much the whole season. So I'm pretty much the freshest guy here. So probably start skating in June and be ready for camp. So it sounds like this was back in May 1st. So I'm going to just assume that Sergachev is having a full, good offseason of training and is coming in ready to go.
Yeah, I think that's fair. That's where I'm coming from, too. I assume there was like a physical element of the acquisition, too, for the Utah Hockey Club. By the way, I have to say, like, I just need to, like, I need to name something out loud that calling it Utah and, like, having the color change versus calling it the Coyotes, like, has really, like, mentally reset how I'm thinking about this team, like more than I care to admit. Like it's really
like now they're good.
Yeah, well, like they also did kind of change their approach. Like they seem to be like, making some moves and throwing some money around and being a little more aggressive. But I look at the depth chart and it's like, hey, I recognize a lot of these names. Like they're very familiar to me. But at the same time, I think there is maybe some value to that organizational reset. And I'm just trying to tease out exactly, like, I kind of want to keep I wish I could, like, get a browser extension that replaces Utah Hockey Club with the Coyotes logo just to avoid, like, falling into that bias. Ottawa had with the ownership change, had a moment where there was an organizational reset and it did not go as good, as well as quickly as everybody hoped. And I don't know if Utah's going to have that same kind of stumbling block or if this is all they really needed to inject a bit of stability and cash and pro arena into the equation and they'll be all set. But we're talking specifically about Sergachev, and yeah, for me, Sergachev is symbolic of that of that shift from Arizona to Utah. And like I said, I don't believe he's being brought there to be anything but their number one guy. I'm looking at Durzi's power play impact from last season on HockeyViz. So HockeyViz.com has some great isolated impact charts that sort of account through their calculations and methodology. So it's not, not foolproof, and everybody calculates this differently, but basically trying to ascertain what Durzi's specific impact was in certain situations. And on the power play, Durzi, according to HockeyViz, didn't have much of one on the power play. Was a little helpful at 5-on-5, but not so much on the power play. And Elon, I think that confirms how you and I felt as managers with Durzi on our rosters, and seeing him go super cold for stretches because the power play wasn't producing, or then it was, but without him. So I am thinking that Sergachev is on the top power play. And really, Sergachev has been extremely consistent for the last, most of his career. This is already, believe it or not, going to be Sergachev's 8th full season in the NHL. And all of those seasons but one, he's been a 40-point player, plus or minus 5 points, and plus basically every time except for one. The only season he didn't do that, he got an extra 20 power play points in Tampa. That was a couple seasons ago now, when he took the job from Hedman and then lost the job, or was ceded the job, whatever it was. But now I'm looking at Sergachev in Utah and thinking I'm going to give him those 20 power play points back, and I'm going to consider him as being a 65-point defenseman. And I don't think that's like overly rosy. Like we're looking at, like, it seems like there's a competent power play unit there in Keller, Schmaltz, Genther, Cooley. There's 4 right there. You can add Michelli to the mix if you want. That's probably the only other.
Barrett Hayton, we'll see if he can ever.
There's a couple guys who could be guys on the top power play, who could be like the Stefan Neesons, or I shouldn't malign Jamie Benn necessarily, like use him this way. Alex Chiasons, that's where I'm getting. So Elon, wow,
You're into
I'm long-winded tonight, but I'm into Sergachev. That's what I'm saying.
All right. Well, Trev asked 2 questions. He said, Durzi, Trev actually asked a lot of questions in the chat here, but in one of the questions, it was a double. And he said Durzi or Sergachev power play 1, and then his next one was Montour or Dunn power play 1. So we've done one of them. Brian is answering Sergachev. How can I disagree, especially when you say that thing about Durzi's impact not even being that great? So let's go next to Seattle and tackle that other question. Seattle made some splashes themselves here in free agency. They signed Brandon Montour to one of the biggest contracts of the off season. So Montour is now locked in for. Here, I'm just bringing it up. It's 7.1 cap hit for I think like 8 years or 7 years. So he's locked in. 7 years for Brandon Montour, and then. We have the incumbent in Vince Dunn. This is a very interesting situation for sure. And Seattle was already a team that was kind of running 2 power plays, so maybe the easy answer is just both, and they'll both get 50% of the time. But Brandon Montour, I got to say, Brian, he's another guy that I don't want us to add to our dynasty team at any point. That's a long contract for a guy who basically, if you look at his career stats, there's one season where he had 73 points a couple seasons ago. Then last year, he was, people are going to be like, he was injured just right off. Like, he still played 66 games, Montour, and ended up with only 33 points. And maybe a lot of it was just, getting back into game shape and whatever. It was obviously a really slow start. So fine, you can write it off if you want. But before that, he never was anything. But of course, before that, he never got top power play. So it was like he got that top power play on Florida a couple seasons ago. He exploded, had that insane year. But it's a big bet on Seattle to now just hope that he can still do that. And meanwhile, just for contrast, let's talk about Vince Dunn, who I guess like for a long time when he was in St. Louis, it just seemed like he was a little bit buried. And when he went to Seattle, I remember like both of us were like, I don't know if I'm going to like be too excited about Vince Dunn. And he really showed us, right? Like these last couple seasons, both of them, he's paced for 64 and 65 points with like not too much on the power play, right? Last season, he had 16 power play points in only 59 games. So I guess that probably goes to like around 20 23 power play point pace. That's pretty good. But like Vince Dunn obviously also is contributing a lot of even strength. So maybe this isn't so bad for Vince Dunn if it's just things stay the same and he just gets half the power play time like usual. Though I guess at the end of the day, I do see he had 58% according to Frozen Pool. So this is a tricky one, but I'll just say my gut feeling is not stoked on Montour. Like he'll get a chance, I'm sure, though.
Yeah.
So yeah, what do you think?
I'm still having a hard time with Montour. Last season, like he was down 2% in shooting at 5-on-5 compared to the 2 seasons before. His shot attempt rates went up, for what that's worth. Just fewer made it on net. His points participation rate was down at 30% after having been at 40% for the 2 years prior. And his on ice shooting percentage was also down a little. So these are all like things that make me think, I think he could have done better. But then again, you mentioned Montour had like a 41 point pace overall. So he would have had to do a lot better to get to where he was before at 5-on. Well, that's in the bigger picture. 5-on-5 still, it was kind of it's a bigger gap than, I'm not sure it's fully explained by the variance. And I imagine in Seattle, he could be playing a smaller role, right? You've got Vince Dunn and Adam Larson, who could, that's the top pair. I don't know how Montour will fit into that picture. I don't know how the power play units are going to work. Remember, we're talking about like a newly coached Seattle team too, and we've talked about this earlier in the offseason where I don't know. Are they going to split their power play units? Are they going to roll a top 9? No idea. And so there's uncertainty with Montour moving to the Kraken, and there's uncertainty with the Kraken as a whole. So like I would take a swing on Montour at the right time in my draft, not in a cap league. Like I would want to stay away in that circumstance because there's a decent chance that Montour could like really, like I'm almost seeing like a parallel with the way Seattle went after Grubauer, right? Like they took a guy who had showed up a couple times, not in like a large volume and not for a whole career, but was like, we're going to bet big on this guy. And that bet some days looks good, looks fine, but most days,
No.
but most days it doesn't.
Some days.
I'll say like one night in a vacuum or 3 nights in a vacuum. It's like, oh yeah, like it worth it. But the rest of the time, no. You're right. That was a little too generous.
I don't recall anyone thinking that for a long time.
I meant based on occasional performances.
Once in a while, he has a good game. You're right. Okay, but anyways, yeah. So I think I get what your point is. Anyways, I'm just like being an ass, but I think that Montour could work out, and I agree with you. But it's like it's a big bet, and
it's a big bet, and I wouldn't want to make it with my dynasty team. With my redraft like non-cap league team, I will draft him as like a 50-point player.
Who are you taking first between Dunn and Montour?
I think I would take Montour only because Dunn, if one guy is going to get 0 power, like if they're going to have a solid top power play unit, I'm going to guess that Montour is the guy who gets there.
Yeah.
Dunn.
I just have a hunch. That I'd prefer Dunn. Like I have a hunch that they're gonna like start with Montour and then they're gonna switch. Like also maybe I'm using it like weighing too much the fact that Montour lost the top power play for the last couple of games of the Cup Finals and Oliver Ekman-Larsson was there, but that could have been like due to like injuries and whatever, just shaking things up. So I don't know. They had lost a few games in a row to the Oilers, but
what's really interesting about Dunn is that like 2 straight seasons of a 65-point pace, and not a ton of it has come by like a reasonable amount has come from the power play, but these aren't like gangbusters top power play numbers that he's been producing to get to 65 points. It's actually been like some solid 5-on-5 production. And I'm trying to see, like, he shot 11% a couple years ago. Like he barely shoots, so that ended up being 14 goals, and his shooting percentage has been high the last couple of years. He shot 10% the last 2 seasons, put up 25 goals. Again, in Seattle 2 years ago, his on-ice shooting percentage was 12.5%. I don't know. I feel like, and I know it might be hard to believe because Dunn has done this like twice in a row now, and he's been on the top power play unit or power play 1A, whatever. I'm still not sold. If one of these two guys is going to get to 65 points next year, yeah, I'll say it's Montour rather than Dunn. You think Dunn?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna like bet my house on it, but I'd put it up on the bet board for a pizza that at the end of the cupful season, Dunn will have the higher fantasy points per game in our league format. But I do definitely think that Montour's going to get a shot of getting a good power play role, and maybe that'll be enough. But we'll see because it like Dunn, like you said, has been pretty solid. I guess we should mention the other acquisition for Seattle. They also made a big bet. I don't know. We need to get Jeremy here, our resident Kraken fan, see how he feels. Chandler Stevenson is now, as of this moment, July 8th, 2024, the highest paid forward in terms of cap hit for the Kraken is Chandler Stevenson, who signed for 7 years, 6.25 per year. I did not know that Chandler Stevenson was that good. He's been fine. We've talked about him on the podcast before. He's gone on runs, usually when we get excited because he's like with an Eichel or with a Mark Stone. I never really thought of him as like such a key contributor. I guess he is doing lots of intangibles. Does he win faceoffs? I'm not sure. I definitely don't want him in our dynasty league either, Brian. I'll tell you that right now. I'm assuming you're not going to argue with me there. Yeah, probably he won't be the highest paid forward for long. Like Matty Beniers is about to get an extension. He's an RFA. I feel like if I'm Matthew Beniers, I'm like, look, at least pay me more than Chandler Stevenson, right? So
Yeah. Yeah,
that makes his negotiations easier, I think.
Much easier. Like I'm sure Matty Beniers is. I mean, he was already going to, I think, do okay. Like 6.25 is not a huge hurdle to clear. I think he was already getting there. But now maybe he can say, well, if that's worth 6.25, then I'm worth like 1.5 times that rather than just anyway. We'll see what happens. But yeah, I think he's probably the big winner with this Chandler Stevenson signing, which is just so curious. I'm so curious. Remember when the Golden Knights acquired Chandler Stevenson from the Caps for, was it future considerations?
Was he not in the? Oh yeah, that was midseason. That wasn't in the draft, like the expansion draft.
No.
Yeah, it was a big win, of course. Like he's done really well for Vegas, but we're still talking about.
It was a fifth round pick. Just to fix. In 2021, Vegas drafted Washington drafted Ty Murchison with it, and we don't know who that is. Chandler Stevenson for free at $1 million. Yeah, good for him. What a way to.
And now he's now he's going to make a lot of money. But we're still talking about a guy who's been like a 55 to 65 point player on Vegas, which is nothing to sneeze at. I guess I've always, but maybe you could tell me I'm wrong. Like I always kind of thought of him as someone who got a lot of his points due to playing with like stars, like, and not to like take anything away from him, but I don't recall ever being like, oh, this guy's playing with Stevenson, so he'll be really good. It was always just like, oh, Stevenson's playing with Stone lately, so that's going to be good for Stevenson. And like he's gone into free agency in my fantasy leagues at various times, even during these decent seasons. So I don't know. Like in Cupful, I don't even know how excited I am to draft Stevenson in like a 1-year non-cap league. Like what kind of? Like if he's on Seattle, who like no one ever seems to get too many points. I know they have like a new coach. Maybe some things will be different. Like what's the upside here? 50 points? 55?
Yeah,
it's boring.
Sure. I think it is boring. I think he's a boring play. I think maybe like I would feel like I'm drafting a 50-point player with upside for a little bit more. Right. Yeah. I think that's it. I think the biggest trick is to avoid falling into the trap of thinking Chandler Stevenson is a $6 million plus player. Like one way I try and like legitimize or understand the contract is like Stevenson has 2 Stanley Cups, right? He got one with Washington, he got one with Vegas, and maybe that adds like $2 million to his contract, and the rest is more representative of what he has to offer offensively.
Yeah. I will say, Brian, one guy, it's like a little bit like I don't want to give away our strategies, but I guess that's the contract we've made for hosting a podcast is we have to say everything we're thinking, and that's the law. But one guy I would be interested in grabbing in our dynasty draft if, not now, like in a few rounds, Eli Tolvanen just got extended, $3.475 million for 2 seasons, a short term, not too much money. He gets a lot of hits. Had a good year last year. I'm not expecting gangbusters, but Like in terms of like 1 year league, I probably would also take Tolvanen over a Chandler Stevenson, just to tell you. Or I think they could go their coin flip. So regardless of the money they're making, that's where my mind is at with those two guys. Do you want to move on to another team or any other Seattle thoughts you want to share?
No, I like with apologies. I think we need to see what happens or get Jeremy or like someone in the know like to share what the heck is going to be like the philosophy here behind this team before we talk about them anymore, honestly.
Okay, so I've been trying to have connections between all of our conversations here, but I don't have one for this. But I think we should go to the next biggest free agent signing, which is in Boston, because they've got their new line one center in Elias Lindholm, and he's like locked in for big money, and it's like pretty impressive for Lindholm because he's not coming off like the most amazing season. Like things didn't go so well over in Calgary at the start, and he switched to Vancouver, and also didn't go especially well. I guess he had 3 points in the last three regular season games. Before that, it seemed like kind of meh. If you look at the game log, a lot of zeros there. Overall, on the season for Lindholm, he ended up with 44 points in 75 games, which is a 48-point pace, one of his worst paces in a really long time. Yeah, since he left Carolina. That's what he used to do. His season last year, Lindholm, is like what he used to do every year in Carolina. Then he went to Calgary. He became a star. Then last year he had his worst year, but Boston didn't care. They still signed him to 7 years, 7.75 mil. Probably. Well, he's an interesting one because this is another guy kind of like a Gensel where we're walking into a really good situation here, right? Because I'd imagine that Elias Lindholm is going to be playing with David Pastrnak. Just like, we were talking about Gensel's going to go play with Kucherov. Like, I'd be very surprised if that's not the case. And I'd assume top power play. Like, the centers on this team, it's like, we've talked all season long about Zacha and Charlie Coyle. Like, clearly, Elias Lindholm is a step above those guys. So he's going to get all the best deployment in the world. He's going to be playing with Pastrnak. And if not him, then it's because they're splitting things up and he'll play with him on the power play and he'll play with Marchand, Like, so he's going to be right there. What I'd assume this is good. This is a good landing spot for Elias Lindholm. Like, in terms of if we were looking at all the teams, which would be the best for Lindholm's fantasy value, I think this is one of the better places he could have landed because he's a sure shot top line center playing with a super dynamic, awesome player in David Pastrnak. So what's our upside here? Like, how many points are we going to project Lindholm for? Because at the same time, he is coming off a 48-point pace season.
I'm really between forgiving Lindholm for last season and just being like, yeah, he's going to be back to, Calgary. Lindholm was, 65, 70 points with upside for more. Or the other side is, yeah, Calgary Lindholm was the only Lindholm that was helpful to us, and now he's going to go back to Carolina Lindholm. I'm going to lean towards the Calgary side, like that. And one thing I think we need to do is forgive Lindholm for his season in Calgary last season. We talked about it on the show a lot. He did not seem to really change his game under the hood, at least like just going by the numbers I'm seeing. What happened was everyone, like, his line never clicked. His on ice production numbers were just brutal. He was near, like, his line was near 2 expected goals per 60 minutes, where like the baseline that we want to see from anyone in a productive situation is 2.5 expected goals per 60 minutes. And then like if you're at 3, where Lindholm has been for the 2 years prior to last season, that's good. Like, that's where you want to see. And the higher you get above 3, the more like elite you are, or you and your line are. And I'm hopeful that Lindholm can find that chemistry in Boston, whether it's with Pastrnak and Marchand or just one of them. He's going to be on the top power play, which I still expect to be good, even though, yeah, Marchand is currently 36 years old. Pastrnak is still under 30, though. I'm hopeful for Lindholm going into next season. I think that's where I sit. It's like I said, we're deciding whether the Carolina version or the Calgary version is the true one. And I'm going to go ahead and lean Calgary and think there's enough of an interesting supporting cast around him that he's going to be just fine and have a lot of quality guys to play with and minutes to play with them.
Yeah, I think the thing to me that really just speaks to me is like Pavel Zacha was not like a star at all in the league. And now these last couple of years in Boston, he's been like a 60-ish point player. And that's, I think, a lot to do, kind of like Chandler Stevenson, right? I think a lot to do with the line mates he's played with. And now we're going to see Lindholm, who I think is a better player, and he's going to be with those same line mates. So I don't see why Lindholm shouldn't be able to be like a 65, maybe 70-point guy. And, obviously assuming that he has chemistry with Pasternak, but a lot of players have, including Pavel Zacha. Probably this is bad news for Zacha. I don't know if he gets bumped from the top power play, though. Jake DeBrusk is out of the picture. So, yeah, actually, like, when you look at Boston, I mean, the other big signing they made is Zadorov, who's not really, like, fantasy relevant. I know he's a good, like, real-life defenseman. But in terms of the Bruins, they're still not, like, they don't seem super deep. But, like, you can't really not like expect them to do well, because last year like we thought they weren't going to do well when Bergeron and Krejci retired, and they still ended up having a really strong season. But I look at the depth chart here. You've got like Lindholm. Let's say they load it up: Lindholm, Marchand, Pasternak. There's your top line. So who does that leave us with? Zacha can play with Charlie Coyle and Morgan Geekie, who had a nice little season. And then you have a bottom six of a bunch of guys that people probably don't know. Trent Frederick is there. There's a guy, Brazeau, who I added in my Dynasty League right at the end of last season, who I'm hoping that he'll be a swing guy that gives me some games, maybe some hits. But yeah, then on defense, the defense, I mean, you've got McAvoy, you've still got Hampus Lindholm, now they've got Zadorov, so that's good. And now I guess the other big change that Boston made is they, shipped off Linus Ullmark to the Sens. We can get into that a little bit. Obviously, the big news here is just Swayman is, I assume, I don't know, any thoughts on this, Brian? Is Swayman the for sure volume starter now, or is Boston going to just stick with what's always worked, which means Korpisalo gets the Ullmark role for as long as he can handle it? And Korpisalo has done well. When he went to LA, when he was on a team with good defense, Korpisalo did well. He went to Ottawa and it was a disaster, but Ottawa, every goalie that goes to Ottawa is a disaster lately. So I wonder if, maybe not 50-50, but I do wonder if maybe people would potentially, like, I think there could be a trap of like expecting Swayman to now be like so much more valuable than he was last year because he's the starter and Korpisalo is the clear backup, when maybe it will be a little bit closer to just what it's been the last few years. But what do you think about that?
Well, I'll tell you what the real trap here is thinking that Boston's defense is substantially better than Ottawa's. Last season, they were in the same league defensively at 5-on-5. So I don't think that Korpisalo is necessary. I think LA took good care of him. I don't think that Boston is going to take nearly as good care of him. Nor do I think that Boston can provide much better care than Ottawa did. In fact, you know what, Elon? I'm looking at all the expected, the protection Ottawa gave Korpisalo at 5-on-5 is basically identical. It's even a little better than the protection LA gave Korpisalo at 5-on-5 in a much smaller sample, 11 games in LA versus 55 in Ottawa. So I'm not going to read a whole lot into that. I don't know that it's a fair argument. I think what you said earlier about, will Jeremy Swayman and Jonas Korpisalo share the net so long as Korpisalo can handle it? I think that's it. And if Korpisalo shows that he can't handle it, then he won't. If he can, I could see them sharing the net and then Swayman sort of being the go-to playoff starter. And I think those are the two ways it could work out. If you want me to, I'm not going to rule out the chance that Korpisalo can play every other game and be good enough to give his team a chance to win. And I'd say to me, it feels like a greater than 50% likelihood that Swayman and Korpisalo are going to split, but there's still a not insignificant likelihood that Korpisalo will blow it enough times and lead to Swayman getting more starts than he would have otherwise gotten with Ullmark.
Yeah, the way I kind of, tell me if this is a good analogy. Maybe this is like the Islanders a couple years ago. We were coming up with our goalie tiers, and I was like, Sorokin's clearly better than Varlamov. But and obviously last year things really got flipped. So forget about last season. But before that, it was like Sorokin's clearly better than Varlamov. But also they still like to give Varlamov a decent number of games. So you don't want to overrate Sorokin. In a categories league, sure. But in a league like a cupful where it's about volume, we were always a little bit nervous to get too crazy about Sorokin. Then he ended up having that one year where he went ham. So I don't know. It's really tricky. I think that if we don't put Jeremy Swayman, I think there's definitely an argument to be made that Swayman is now a top tier fantasy goalie, and he's the clear starter, and Korpisalo is the clear backup, and Swayman's going to be great. But yeah, this is going to be a tough one. And it'll be tough to decide what tier we're going to put him in Schmorgoli's board, because in theory, this is a really good situation for Swayman. He's an RFA. He's about to make a lot of money. And the fact that Allmark is gone, it means like he has all the leverage. He's going to make a ton of money.
Yeah, which, by the way, is another, like, if we want to, like, get into conspiratorial theories, we could consider that maybe Boston does not anoint Swayman their full-on number one and wants Korpisalo to play half the time, just to keep the price on Swayman down. But
the contract. He doesn't have a contract now. They need to sign him before the season.
After this year. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
They can do that in negotiations. They'll be like, we don't even really need you. We have Korpisalo. So like, why don't we do they could, I guess, like do like a bridge deal for a year. But if Korpisalo turns out to really stink and Swayman's amazing, then. But I mean, already I feel like Swayman can make so much money. So why not just do a bridge deal? But I guess I'm not an NHL GM. Brian, we have some options. Oh, you want to go anything more on Boston?
Well, I was just going to redeem myself a little bit from getting the Swayman contract timing wrong by saying, Korpisalo has a sub 50% quality start percentage. So like that's something that Boston might have to accept in his career and also recently. And over since 2020, the 2020-2021 season. Gosh, I can't wait till we get past that. That's such a mouthful to say. Korpisalo has 28 really bad starts and 134 starts, which is like somewhere between 20 and 25%, if my mental math is correct, which is not great if you're only quality starting less than 50% of the time and really bad starting. Anyway, again, we'll see what happens in Boston. Maybe he'll get lifted up by the team. Somehow, the culture, the winning, the people, I'm open to it.
Well, for other opinion, Santo here in the chat is saying Swayman loves the net. There's no way Corpy gets 40 games. I think if anything, Swayman becomes one of those super workhorse starters. So definitely that's a potential outcome, which would make him steal in drafts if he falls, outside of the top 5 goalies for sure. Okay, so Brian, let's go next. Okay, I have 2 options for you. We could either go to where Jake DeBrusk went in Vancouver and talk about DeBrusk, or we can go to where Allmark went over to Ottawa. You're probably partial to talking about Ottawa, right? Let's do both. Okay, you don't care. Okay, let's do DeBrusk. Okay, let's go to Vancouver first, and then we'll end on your Ottawa Senators. So yeah, that was kind of a surprising signing, right? Jake DeBrusk, who hasn't really established. I feel like every year on the podcast we're like, oh, he's kind of in the doghouse. Oh, is he going to get power play? Oh, he's not getting the power play. We thought that he would, but I guess the Canucks. It's not a Stevenson level of concerning, but 7 years at $5.5 million per season, so less than Chandler Stevenson, over to Vancouver. It's a big commitment to a guy who I guess theoretically could be a top line player. And if you look at Vancouver, they could use a top line player. So they've lost Elias Lindholm, of course. So, but thoughts on Jake DeBrusk now on the Canucks? Is he someone that potentially, similar to what I just asked you about Elias Lindholm, if Jake DeBrusk comes in and he's playing with Elias Pettersson and company, like we can try to guess what these lines and power plays will be. Maybe there's room even for DeBrusk on the top power play. You're going to have obviously Miller, Pettersson, and Besser, and maybe DeBrusk on the top power play with Quinn Hughes. Am I missing someone? What do you think's the upside here?
I don't know.
I feel like this has been your answer for a lot of them. I've started with a sigh.
There's upside.
These are hard.
You know what? There's so much unknown, like on team level and individual level. And sorry, with DeBrusk, my hesitation is I feel like I've never been right on DeBrusk. I think there's been years where I've been excited for him, and then I finally gave up, and then he showed me that I should have held my excitement. And DeBrusk is someone I've kind of like written off as like, you got to show me more. And we thought that maybe DeBrusk broke out with 50 points in 64 games 2 seasons ago now in Boston. That was thanks to his first real look at a consistent, meaningful top power play time in his career. And then like we were like, oh, he's made headway with the coach. And then he lost that whatever he'd gained. And so the thing DeBrusk has going for him is there's not a whole lot of competition for him in Vancouver's top 6. So yeah, he's going to slot in with Miller and Pettersson. With one or the other. He's going to probably, like I'm with you, I feel like he's going to get there on the top power play too. And for me, I just wonder what he can show. He's one of these guys whose numbers under the hood have always looked pretty decent. Like his expected goals rates, his individual numbers have always been solid. Like these are numbers that I'd expect somebody to put up real numbers with beyond the expected, but he hasn't. So I don't know what to make of DeBrusk. I'd like to think that he's going to be able to capitalize on this new position. I just can't get too over the moon about him, but I 60 points, Elon? Like, is that just like, can I just say 60 points?
You can just say 60 points, and I think we have to put...
I'll take the under on that also.
I think I might take the over. I think I might take the over. But again, it's like, it's obviously tricky to say. It's a new situation, but it's just such an obviously good opportunity. Kind of like some of these other guys we've talked about, where it's just like, there's no one else. Like, who else is taking that last spot on the top power play? They just signed to a 7-year deal. Like, it's not going to be Connor Garland. Like, it's not going to be Höglander. It's not going to be, I don't know, Dakota Joshua. They like
Suter.
it as like, yeah, Suter. Like, I guess Suter did get some power play time, but no, I mean, it's clearly the plan, the hope, and then obviously it has to go well. But the hope is for the top power play now to be Pettersson, Miller, Besser, DeBrusk, Quinn Hughes. Shams is saying in the chat here that the GM mentioned that DeBrusk is going to start the season with Pettersson at even strength. It's such a great opportunity. I think that I'm going to go over 60, and I think in a dynasty league, it's a bit of a risk because of the long contract, but 5.5 mil isn't too much. I was only 27 years old. I think there's a lot of potential value here in fantasy. If you want to take a bit of a risk, I think you could potentially get a lot of reward here, especially since you're saying under the hoodies look good. Maybe in Boston, just for whatever reason, it didn't click, and now on a new team, maybe he could really take off. So I think this is a pretty exciting one. As far as anything else on Vancouver, what did Vancouver do? They didn't. So Casey DeSmith is gone. Who's the backup right now? Is it that Silovs was the backup last year, and then he even got some playoff games? Kevin Lankinen still isn't signed. I feel like.
So what's your question? You're wondering if Silovs is the backup?
Yeah, or if they're gonna like still sign Kevin Lankinen.
Why? Of course
Silovs,
you do.
Silovs is like he's young. You don't want to like depend on him now as the back. He should go to the AHL.
I mean, if you're going to play
year.
Demko 60, 65 games a season.
Well, we've seen how that's worked. He gets injured all the time. They got to get someone that can play.
Well, wait, hang on. I was going to say if you're going to do that, then you should put Silovs in the AHL. But if you're not going to do that, and you're making the argument that they shouldn't, then I think Silovs would be a great idea to have.
No, I say...
You say
sign Kevin Lankinen.
Sign Kevin Lankinen, purposely injure Thatcher Demko.
No. But like limit Demko a little bit. Kind of what we were saying like about Swayman. Like, let Lankinen play some games so that Demko will be fresh for the playoffs. Let Silovs be in the minors. Get Lankinen for a year or two, and then Silovs will eventually come up when he's, a little older. I think it makes sense. I'll bet you Vancouver's going to get another goalie at the end of this. I don't think they're going next year with... They signed Yuri Patera from Vegas. They're not going to have like Patera and Silovs as their only options outside of Demko, I think. Anything else to bring up here for Vancouver? They signed Danton Heinen. He was like kind of seemed like he was out of the league, and now all of a sudden he had a decent enough year last year. Oh, they signed Kiefer Sherwood. He's good for hits out of Nashville. So if you need hits, Kiefer Sherwood, 2 years, 1.5 mil. But okay, let's end, Brian, in Ottawa. There's a lot to talk about in Ottawa, though. How about let's do half of Ottawa? Oh, this will be fun. Let's do half of Ottawa here, and then we'll start with Ottawa again on the next one. Let's do the goal.
That feels extremely
great.
weird.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
But I'm up for trying it.
We're going to end this show with the goaltending in Ottawa, and then we're going to start next show with the Jacob Chychrun trade. Okay? And it'll be like a little bit of Ottawa talk, but really we're going to be talking then about Washington and Chychrun, and that'll be like the start of the next show. Okay, it's good. But it'll be a nice little connector. But yeah, Ottawa signed Korpisalo for 5 years, and after a year they were like, this did not go well. Similar to what happened with Cam Talbot, similar to what happened with Matt Murray. It's a bit of a trend, but maybe this time things will be different because now they've got a goalie who's not too old and has a really good track record. And Linus Ullmark, he's coming in. He's did they end up extending? No. So he's got 1 year left on his contract, and then we'll see what happens next year if the Sens extend him. The backup on Ottawa, I guess, will be Anton Forsberg, who Ullmark said like he got a call from. So I don't know if they're friends. They're both Swedish, right? Okay, so anyway, we've got probably a volume goalie on Ottawa. Again, I don't want to be like, I feel like I'm getting deja vu from last year. It was like, yeah, they brought Korpisalo in. He's going to be a volume goalie as long as he plays well. But I assume we're higher on Allmark, who's done so well these past few years, won a Vezina trophy for frickin' sake. So I think this could be really good. Or it could be, well, you just said how Boston's defense wasn't even that great. I was going to say, like, maybe he was just like benefiting from being on Boston. I remember Allmark also did well back when he was on Buffalo, and they were like really terrible. And it was like, he wasn't amazing, but I remember being like, oh, he's actually doing pretty well for a goalie on Buffalo. So I'm very curious to see how things go for Allmark in Ottawa. And I think he definitely has the potential to be a really high-end goalie in fantasy. But also, I'm very nervous to actually recommend him because it's a goalie on Ottawa.
This is all true. I'm optimistic, Elon. I'm optimistic. I'm more about Korpisalo. I was not optimistic.
This is like, by the way, for everyone to know, like Brian said it at the time of the signing. He was not optimistic. So this isn't any revisionist history. It's like Brian called it and he was right. So let's see if he'll be right again now. More optimistic about Allmark.
Well, I just like to think I'm not hopelessly optimistic about a goalie in this situation. So for me to say that I'm optimistic about Allmark in Ottawa, I think speaks somewhat, like, means something. I don't think and Allmark has been amazing the last 2 seasons, right? We've talked about the Vezina. We've talked about like contending for a cup. 15 save points above his expected Fenwick save percentage 2 seasons ago, 11 last season. I think the only knock against Allmark is he might be getting a little older, but there's also not a whole lot of miles on him, although there are a couple injuries, so that's something to be mindful of. But really, Allmark, for the majority of his career, has been good. He hasn't always been great, but he's been good. There's been a couple rough stretches and spells, like going back to Buffalo. So we're gonna find out now whether or not Allmark can bring that what he has to offer to Ottawa and he's gonna have to be a pretty important part of that team. So I'm optimistic. I think he's a volume starter. So this is going to be the first time in a few years that we are looking at Linus Allmark and seeing 55 plus starts. And I'm like, what more can I say? It's a goalie other than I'm hopeful, I'm optimistic. And I think this could be a really good fit. I think it's a big win for Ottawa. And now we'll see if Allmark can live up to what hopes and expectations are for him.
Yeah, I think it's an exciting time, as always, to be a Sens fan. And if they can get good goal, I feel like a lot of people have said like the Sens aren't actually that bad if they could just get some decent goaltending. So hopefully they get it next year, just to see like what this team can do. Not even good, like average, get average goaltending. And I'd like to see how the Sens will do. And then, for Allmark, I agree with you. He's probably a volume goaltender. And if he can handle it, this can be a really good situation in fantasy. So definitely a lot of upside here. And with that, Brian, we've gone through quite a few teams, but there's still a lot more to get to. So we'll get back together in a week or so. And we'll get right down to it once more, covering the rest of all the fun free agency that's gone on. Oh, we have a question here really quickly because we already talked about Tampa, so we're not going to go back. Question: thoughts on whether Vasilevsky regains his elite fantasy status after a down year? That's from Santo. I mean, so Vancouver just edit point. I mean, so Tampa did trade away Sergachev, as we've discussed, and I did mention their defense, and it seemed a little bit like, though, I think that someone like a McDonough is good defensively. Like Sergachev is exciting for the offense. Maybe McDonough does actually help keep some pucks out of the net. Stamkos, I did see also some tweets, or someone was saying something about how like Stamkos actually wasn't that great at the defensive part of the game, so this could actually potentially be good for Vasilevsky also, that he's being replaced with Gensel. So I think there's definitely a chance that Vasilevsky, I mean, he's Andrei Vasilevsky. I feel like he's kind of like a Ovechkin type. Back in the day, we would always be like, you don't want to count Ovi out. You don't want to, count Crosby out. I feel like Vasilevsky still, isn't too old. I think there's definitely a really good chance that, yes, he does regain his elite fantasy status. But, I think I'll put him in tier 2 of Smorgasbord board. I think he's knocked himself out of tier 1 for having a down year. I think like I would bank on like a Shesterkin or Ottinger. I think that might be it. We'll have to go through it. But I think I like those guys more than Vasilevsky at this point. But I think I'd have Vasilevsky like right in the next tier. What do you think?
Sure. I mean, I don't want to get too deep into it, like pre-Smorgasbord.
Of course.
Yeah. So I'm just for now gonna like politely co-sign onto most of what you just said.
Okay.
Yeah.
Santos says, and people forget he's 29. For a goalie, that's a baby. Markstrom only started being good when he was like 42 years old or something. So who knows? All right. Thank you so much for everyone who joined the live show. This has been a really fun, active chat here. And thanks to everyone for listening. We always appreciate our summer series listeners because our numbers are down, but it just means it's, quality over quantity. And you're the creme de la creme of our listeners. So thanks so much for tuning in. Make sure you're subscribed so you'll get the next episode in this series of indefinite length. Thanks so much to the patrons. We've been having a lot of fun in our Patreon. We've been doing daily voting on player rankings, and we're past the top 10 now. Thanks so much to Trev for helping with that. It's been a lot of fun. We got mock drafts going. Anyone who wants can just, any patron, you come into the Discord, you say, I want a mock draft. You click the little hand. Then when we get to 14, we make a mock draft. We've already done, we're like 8, I think, 7. I don't know. We've got mock drafts going like all the time, basically. So definitely you could come in, join a mock draft. You got to get training if you want to do well in fantasy next year. And after you've listened to this podcast, you can put some of these, tips we've given you to the test. And also you can sign up to register for the Cupful, the Keeping Karlsson Auto Patron Fantasy League. It's going to be a ton of fun next year. Registration is open. So for that and more, another reason, by the way, you can join and become a patron is because it's only $1 right now. We have it as low as it can be. So come hang out for the summer. We hope you'll like it and decide to stay with us for all of next season. So that's keepingkarlsson.com/patron to get in on all the fun. But with that, Brian, let's cue the outro music. And why don't you go ahead and read us the credits?
All right. This episode of the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast is presented by Dauber Hockey and powered by our patrons, including... I'm going to put the edit point there because I wasn't fast enough.
Patty, Dustin, who is only a super supporter because he tagged me in a post and he thought I wasn't going to...
An even super supporter.
Yeah, you didn't see it.
I blew it.
Who else?
A
lot of people. That was actually like
super supporters.
I'm blank at this point.
Including... Wait, what did I say? I'm going to start over. Can I start over?
Okay, sure.
This episode of the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast was presented by Dauber Hockey and powered by our patrons, including and especially our super supporters Paul, Roman, Don, Michael, Jordan, Brian, Patrick, Aaron, Philip, Ivan, Sammy, Andrea, Zach, Tom, Ryan, David, Rickard, and Patty. Thank you to Cupful coordinator Kevin Haybear, who is crushing it, helping us get ready for Season 10, Season X of the Cupful. That's we're not calling it Season X, though. It's Season 10. Thank you, Elon, Shams. If you're like thirsting, chomping for reliable hockey news, GameDayTweets.com. It's all still coming. Thanks to Elon and Shams. Logo art, including our celebratory 10th anniversary Cupful logo by BrandonWeeb.com. Outro music by Pat Roach. This episode was researched with help from Dauber Hockey, Frozen Tools, Dauber Prospects, Natural Stat Trick, Evolving Hockey, Cap Friendly, The Athletic, HockeyGoldies.org, Hockey Reference, Hockey Viz, Hockey Database, Elite Prospects. And that's it.
That's it. Okay. Great. Well, thanks so much, Brian. And yeah, thanks also for me to all the super supporters. Really appreciate you. And everyone, we will be back soon with another episode breaking down, starting with the Sens losing Chikrin. I shouldn't say losing. They traded him, but I mean, it seems kind of like they lost him when you look at the return. But we'll get to that on the next episode. So until then, Brian, what should we all do through the most boring month of fantasy hockey, except not if you're a patron Keeping Karlsson, because we're, like I said, we're having a lot of fun.
Yeah, mock drafting and dynasty drafting. Now's a good time to invite someone in, let them know that fantasy hockey is for everyone.
Nice. All right, thanks everyone. Brian, we have to make our pick now. Should we discuss in public
do it
or
live?
Is that crazy?
I guess.
All right. Well, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't mind advice.
And enough vagaries.
Okay. Well, first of all,
because we can't really, we don't want to blow up our spot, right?
Okay. Well, I'll just say this:
players.
Well, I'll name a couple players. I think it's okay.
I don't know that you.
I don't know. All right. Let's just get out. Let's just say bye. But it would be good to get advice. Can I just ask between two people and ask who people would pick between two?
Yeah.
Okay. This is a cap dynasty categories league with goals, assists, shots, hits, blocks, and like power play points. But the power play points is a fun like Fantrax category where it's like you get one for it's like special teams points, but where the shorthanded points are worth double. It's like one for a power play point and two for a shorthanded point. So you get a little bonus if the player gets some shorties, which is relevant here. The two guys we're kind of looking at are either Cale Makar, who's fallen. I didn't expect him to fall this far. So this is an 8th overall pick. You get Cale Makar, 24 years old. He's got $9 million contract for like 2-3 more years, and he'll probably get like $1 zillion. But he's Cale Makar, and he's really he had like 4 shorthanded points last year, which doesn't sound like much, but that works up to like 8 power play points, and because of the scoring. So he ranks really high in that category, decent enough for blocks, not great for hits, good points. Okay, and then the other guy we're deciding between, it's round 1 champs. So we're looking at Cale Makar or Jack Hughes, who's like nothing for hits. So he's a bummer there, but he's like so awesome, obviously, for shots and for goals and assists and power play. And he's so young. He's only 23 years old. He's going to be a star forever. Makar's already almost going to be 26 soon. Old. But so anyways, we have to decide between those two. And then also we have a offer of a trade, which I guess probably that one we should keep to ourselves, but maybe, I don't know. But Brian and I need to talk, and there's a big long delay here, so maybe we can wait like a minute to see. Brian, where are you leaning right now? Is it like clearly Makar over Jack Hughes?
Yeah, I think so.
Seems like he's such a star.
Seems like the VORP is pretty strong there.
Yeah, I don't want to give the strategy. Okay, yeah. Hughes because of the contract. Yeah, Hughes is like locked in for an $8 million per year for like a really long time. So it's just like really nice certainty.
Do you know that you're in a voice channel on our Discord server?
No, I didn't mean to do that. Disconnect. Okay, I'm turning that off. Okay, well, good thing I didn't say anything I didn't want to. Was there anyone in there?
No, it's just
okay,
you.
Phew.
And I couldn't hear you when I went in.
Okay, so Jack Hughes, yeah, $8 million for another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years, as opposed to Makar, $9 million for only 3 years.
There's great cost control for Hughes. I think we also have to consider there's a bigger part of our strategy that we've discussed that I think factors in here that I probably shouldn't spill.
Okay, so I really appreciate it, everyone. And Brian and I will chat now. But I hope you enjoyed the show. Talk to you later. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
End stream.